First item of the agenda, discuss the possible 2015 SPLOST projects.
Madam Chair, couple of things. I was going back to the agenda for the April 6th meeting. In that agenda, in those after agenda minutes, consensus of the board was that any recommendation from the Park and Recreation Advisory Board be limited to the top 5 projects so they can reasonably prove it won't cost the county anything to operate once SPLOST funding ends. So, above that, consensus was no new projects to be considered in the 2015 SPLOST. We held our 2 public hearings, the first of those on April the 11th, the second on April the 14th. And I have here the Park and Recreation Advisory Board's recommendations for you. I sent those out on April the 15th. But as you can see, they are quite voluminous. They are, even though we asked for the top 5 projects, we didn't get that. We got some more additional information. So I don't know what the board wants to do. I've also sent you asked for information on the debt service and how much rollback would be. I provided the commissioners that information. Excuse me. If we did the debt service like we talked about at April the 6th meeting, which was the fire station, the equipment there, which is in the unincorporated area, the correctional institution, Oxford Square, and everything associated with the senior center there, the computers and furniture and fixtures that we lease purchased there. Total reduction in millage rate for the FY17 budget would be a .932 mills or $35.43 for a $100,000 fair market value home in unincorporated Spalding County. And for the cities of Griffin, Orchard Hill, and Sunnyside, they would see a .37 mill reduction because only the general fund projects would apply there, and that's $14.06. So I didn't know, that was one of the things we were asked to do by the board as well. Today I got a request through Mr. Mosley from the fire department for about, let's see, 5, 6, 7, 8, about $10 million for the fire department for 3 new stations, the equipment and things of that matter, a new training facility, and a new emergency operations center. So going from the fact that the board said no new projects, I didn't make copies of that for you, but it is over here if you'd like to take a look at that.
How much you say was 10 million?
10 or 11, yes, sir. Now, we can afford $10 or $11 million to buy and construct all this stuff. It's the
Operating expenses.
20 people per station that are funded in perpetuity for those 3 shifts per station that makes our millage rate and would cause us to go above 5 mills in the fire district tax, which we could not do currently. We'll have to wait until the tax digest catches up. Commissioner Flowers Taylor, had called me earlier today. I'm sorry she's not here, but she had asked me a couple of questions. How many years did we finance the LB Norton Fire Station? We financed it for 10 years. I mistakenly told her 20, it's 10 years. Also, we are in the process, there's nothing in any of the SPLOST requests for moving the tower from State Route 155 to an alternate location. Thank you, sir. And she thought that that was maybe something we could consider as well for a SPLOST project. But again, that goes against what the board said earlier at the April 6th meeting, where no new projects would be considered. We were just going to consider projects that were on the November 2014 ballot. So that's about all the information, new information I have for you.
The tower,
I know we said no new projects, but how much are we paying a year to rent the tower on McDonald Road?
It would take us 2.5 years to pay for itself, to pay for moving it to another location. It's going to cost about $250,000 to move take the equipment off that tower, move the building, move the generator, move everything from there to another location, whether it be the Verizon tower at the corner of Teeman and Jordan Hill, or a new tower we construct at the Jordan Hill Road water tank. Either way, we're going to spend $250,000 just moving it. That doesn't include if we build a new tower at the water tank or what's required. We're doing propagation studies now. Those are studies to determine where the footprint is on where you put it on that tower to make it cover the entire area, to see if we can even get a propagation map at the Jordan Hill Road water tower to work. That would be our most economical thing, is to build our own tower there. The Water Authority owns the land. It's over 3 or 4 acres. It's a large piece of land. We can put up as tall a tower as we need. Therefore, the only expense, once we got the tower and the relocation moved, would be just the utilities and the maintenance and operation. There'd be no rent on that. Where if we did Verizon, we might want to swap rent for the Verizon that we're leasing over here on Williamson Road, which right now is a revenue, so it would wash itself out. But I'd rather us own our own tower and rent.
Think about it, is 2.5 years it would be paid for.
Yes, sir.
Other than electricity. That you're not considering, but what you're doing is, what's that thing, $9,000? How much was it a month you paying rent on?
It's roughly $7,000 to $8,000. It's pretty stacked.
You talk about a lot of money that you're paying for rent on.
Yes, sir.
And the rent ain't gonna never go away unless you do something.
And it's only going to go up. Yes, sir.
you were asking more questions then.
You see the request from Park and Rec before you. I can make you a copy, if you need one, of the projects that we had on the November ballot. Okay? I'll get Eric to make a copy real quick. I can find my sheet that had all that on it.
Here.
Thank you. Well, mine's color. Let him copy in color so you can see. Okay. Can differentiate that last page if you understood that. Right now, it doesn't appear, or we can't predict how much House Bill 170, the effect it will have on SPLOST. We're hoping it's minute, but haven't seen a final draft from ACCG. Have seen that, and you might find this interesting. Right now, the county's exempt from motor fuel tax and things like that. Effective in July, the motor fuel tax, I believe, of 6%. I'm not really sure exactly, but we will be paying that, so our cost for petroleum products will go up effective July 1 due to House Bill 170. And I heard today that the hotel motel associations were jumping up and down about the additional $5
Yeah.
tax and caught blindsided by that. So,
Yeah, they're gonna try to get major adjustments in that component of the bill
next year.
next year.
But right now, it goes into effect in 65, 70 days.
Right. So, besides the fire department, besides Parks and Rec, with this list, we heard during the citizen comment sessions on April 11 and 14, proponents of the aquatic center. I haven't heard anything from anybody on the animal control center, the new shelter that was on last year's list.
They have a meeting on Wednesday to discuss that.
And they will be here.
But just in terms of the process, and beyond, the consensus that Wayne reminded us of, I thought Commissioner Ray made a great suggestion that any project that will make the final list must meet certain criteria, such as plans and specs, to a degree that I don't think it was present last year. And we need to sort of set the process here. Maybe we have a sort of preliminary cut of which projects we're at least inclined to entertain on the list, and then allow those projects, make that determination by our May 4th, May 18th meeting, and then by June 22nd, those projects that are basically still under consideration make their pitch by getting more definite plans and specs so that we know exactly what we're asking the voters to approve.
Yes, to piggyback on you a little bit, because I think the two areas here, and I know Raymond had pretty much laid out as far as plans and development and maintenance costs and things like that, come to mind are we talked about the animal control facility, because we weren't sure whether or not that we were going to actually have a new facility for that $1 million, or if there's actually going to be one that's going to be put into the current one.
Right.
So we would need to trying to find out. We don't want to just throw $1 million out there and it not be enough, or it just doesn't, So it would allow an opportunity for someone to kind of come in and kind of discuss that, what that actually looks like, as well as we talked about the swim center. I know I talked to TJ about that to find out. This 3.8, which is a lot, okay, what does it really cost? We talk about things Idle's paying for itself. What does that really cost on a yearly basis to run that? So that would give us an opportunity to look at that, to see what it looked like.
Yes, ma'am, that was an April 14th email from Commissioner Ray, who said that we should require all projects to submit hard validated numbers for the construction of any facility as well as future operations and maintenance as required. This will give us costs for the SPLOST proceeds as well as annual cost to maintain and operate. All requested projects should submit drawings, construction costs, and future operation costs no later than June 20th. And if not submitted by that time, the project will not be considered. We do have a meeting with the city on May the 18th, cities, I'm sorry. We have not sent out the invitations yet, but we will be sending Kenny a letter to all the cities asking him to attend a May 18th, 4 p.m. meeting to present their requests to the county for a November 2015 proposed SPLOST. I'm not sure where Commissioner Ray came up with June 20th. Commissioner Ray, I think that may have been the drop dead day.
Well, it was kind of, I remember the 1st of July, we needed to do something with the resolution, having the resolution done first part to the middle part of July. And with that, we needed sufficient time to identify construction costs of the capital outlay, and then from there, the maintenance and operations costs thereafter. That way that we have prudent information to make a decision on prior to drafting the resolution. And I'm looking at this, the resolution would have to be in no later than 4 August, correct?
Okay,
And
yes.
So therefore, we could push that back from June 20th to, I'd say no later than 15 July. But that would give it a few more days to get information in.
So,
I-
is this something we voted on?
That was
I don't-
just talked to- said
I
we
don't
know
think
that.
I would push it that far. I like your June 20th much better.
Better.
Because,
I have a comment. I'm just not real sure. I mean, when we did the senior center, we didn't have all the drawings and all the figures and all the cost here. We didn't have anything related to the operating cost. Matter of fact, I think we thought that we basically were gonna run the building. I don't know that there was any projection that we expected significant revenue to come in from it. So in terms of some of these, and what we did with the senior center was initially, we were supposed to be spending $1 million. And at the end of the SPLOST, when there were funds left over after everyone else had gotten money, that was a project that was left, and so we actually ended up spending $3 million. So how do you come up with a plan on the front end that tells you what size building you're gonna build and what you're gonna put in it? If you know what I'm saying, you can gestulate that maybe this is what you can get for $1 million, but if in the end you end up with something else. So I kind of have a problem with that, because I don't know that these figures, even if someone comes up with a figure, it's not sealed in cement. And if the price of everything that we're trying to get goes up or goes down, you'll either get more for your dollar or you get less for your dollar. So I think that in terms of some of the numbers that we have been given, it's like with the animal control facility. You're gonna have to have somebody, either we're gonna put it on the same site, or you're gonna have to spend some money for engineering. We're not quite sure what that is, so if you spend $200,000 for engineering, hopefully not. That really only leaves about $800,000. So you have to figure out what kind of building can we put up for $8,000, because that's all that's allocated. So I think you cannot really expect people to show up with a floor plan based, and tell you how it's gonna be.
Yeah, I think, just my opinion here, and I don't know, because I wasn't around when the senior center was being built, but I think the idea is to get away from what happened to that when it first started. Because, I mean, if you say you allotted $1 million for the senior center, and you end up spending $3 million, I mean, no, I don't think you're gonna get the right dollar amount, but at least if there's a projection out there about, okay, this is how much we're gonna put into this, and then go with that. I mean, $3 million, that's like $2 million additional.
But you have to understand, that was an over collection of the SPLOST. The money could either go back into the general fund, or it can go to one of the projects that were allocated on the SPLOST. We had already given excess funds to UGA, twice. We had given excess funds to who else, William?
800 megahertz.
yeah.
To the 800 megahertz. And so the senior center was basically, everything else, I guess, was on track. So that's how that ended up being, that extra money. And then we figured, okay, well, we can actually make this something bigger and nicer with the dollars we had. So it wasn't that we didn't have a plan. It was that that money was not there at first. I mean, and I think that's the same with anything. If you have projects and you have excess collections, if you still have projects that maybe are overrun or that you can make better, you can use that money for that. So I don't think that's a matter of poor planning. That was just okay, here's this extra money, let's do this with it. Of course, it could have gone into the general fund too, but, I think it can only go into, can it go into the general fund only to offset taxes?
It can go into pay any other general indebtedness that we had. So technically, we don't have any GO bond indebtedness, so we could have used it to pay our lease purchases off or things like that.
Okay, William, I'm sorry, go ahead, I know I interrupted you.
I think Raymond had a question. You see if you want to
No, I was
ask?
gonna wait till you finish your comment, then I had,
Don't.
all right. Everyday business identifies cost of any project before they go into it. Then they determine their cost of business in order to ensure that they can make ends meet once they build the building, start the building, and operate the building. And we've got to do the same thing here. We had a gentleman in one of the hearings that said, this is the way you're doing it, this is the way business does it. And he was absolutely right. Government doesn't, we sit down and say, well, his comment there was, you asked for $55 million and then you backfill the projects to spend that money. And he had a very valid point when he said, business doesn't do that. Business comes in and identifies the amount of money needed, then they ask for the money. They go to the banks, get the money, and in this case, we're going to the taxpayers and voters and saying, this is what we're doing. This is what the school system does when they do their SPLOST, and that's one of the reasons I think that they've been so successful. Now, resurfacing roads, paving roads, and repair roads, we pretty much know what that is. But I'm going to use the animal control facility debate we had last time. We were talking two different buildings. We were thinking $1 million, either addition to the building that we now have, or $1 million new construction. And then there was another story that was going on that was not completely accurate, which portrayed a different animal control facility. We can't afford to mess up another SPLOST to where we lose those funds, because our roads are in bad shape, our bridges would need severe work. I'm going to use the Hill Street Bridge down in the Flats as an example. Buses can't go across it. It's limited to 8 tons, William? And there should be some other trucks that shouldn't be going across it that are. But when we look at things of that nature, and what I would like to see this board do for the SPLOST is take a new approach, and that is identify the projects, and by identifying the projects, identify the scope, identify the drawings, identify how much the cost is for design, and that will pretty much they'll be able to do that with their preliminary designs. And at which time, you're going to have some changes, you're going to have things that change on site. But those are adaptable in order for us to facilitate the overall cost of the SPLOST. The citizens have told us they don't want another 800 megahertz radio system scenario. They told us they don't want this scenario and that scenario. And it's time we listen.
Madam Chairman, and Commissioner Ray, I must have missed that meeting, because I didn't hear that. I really didn't hear that. If I understand correctly, our staff have not been directed to run their department as a business. So since we don't really operate with a business projection, that is the problem. Now, if that's what we want to do, then it needs to be done across the board. Because how do you start picking and choosing which projects need to pay for themselves? The CAD it's not mandatory. What we got now, it works. The CAD would be better, but whose decision is that? Somebody might think, I need a couple of ravines filled, or I need my road paved, and the ambulance can already find where you're going. So how is the CAD going to pay for itself? Is there going to be any funds generated? I look at in the roads and streets. I look at that. I see several projects, and this is just in general. I'm trying to figure out how we have a bridge in the flats that's rated 3, and Commissioner Hallbaker's bridge, which is rated 18, but there's funding for your bridge, but there's no funding for a major tributary, which is North Hill Street at a fairly busy intersection. So, you know, we need to either do it the same way all the time, or we don't, because that's what we've been doing. So my concern with bridges and roads is that, you know, I want to know which bridges are we talking about we're going to repair. I want to know which roads are going to be repaired. I don't want that to be haphazard. They're never going to pay for themselves. The roads are never going to pay for themselves. So where are you going to generate revenue from that? You'll never see it. You'll never be able to measure it. You can forecast that trucks are going to come over it and they're going to be carrying their goods or whatever. But it's nothing that you can objectively say that you can guarantee that money is going to be made from that. You know, we don't require the Correctional Institute. They do have some revenue. They do generate some revenue, but I don't know if that's 10% of what it costs to operate it, if that's 20% of what it costs to operate it, because to my understanding, we're not actually required to run that facility. We're required to run the jail, which is the detention center, and if the cost of running the CI is so much more that we're having to pay out, maybe we might need to give that up. Because if we're going to go to a business model, a good business person wouldn't be throwing that money away. They would be taking that extra money and doing something else with it. So, you know, you look at the animal control facility. They generate some funds when people adopt or whatever, but they're not significant in terms of what it costs to run it. It's not set up as a business model. We don't advertise that there are pets for adoption. We don't advertise it that you can get a pet spayed or neutered. So we either set up a business model that works for everything, or we don't. Or, you know, I think it needs to be defined. And then my question would be, how do we choose which areas that we feel need to support themselves? And what are we basing that on? Because like you said, you got people have different priorities, you know, and it's what they think is important. So, you know, I have some concerns that, you know, the soccer lighting at Wyoming Park, it's not going to pay for itself. There's no projection that they can give us that says that there's going to be an economic thrust as a result of being done there. So, you know, I'm just asking you guys to consider that. I agree that if we're going to do a business model, we need to do it all the way, but not pick and choose.
Commissioner Ray.
Some of my comments have been misconstrued, and I apologize for that because evidently I didn't make myself clear in that the SPLOST should follow the business model. We've heard from all through the ages, government is not business, business is not government. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying the SPLOST should be identifiable. The projects should be identified by cost to construct and future cost and what it would cost to facilitate the utilities, operations, maintenance of the building, and what cost could come in from that for future operations. I'm not saying apply that to every department because you can't. Not in government. Different things happen. Gwen brought up a very good point of roads and services. I mean roads. Roads are a service. I mean, we can go back to dirt roads. We won't have anybody living in Spalding County. We won't have things being transported to and from Spalding County or through Spalding County. And with that, we'll lose revenues, we'll lose retail sales, we'll lose sales tax. And those are the things that we have to weigh upon in order to facilitate what's best for Spalding County and the taxpayers of Spalding County. In no way did I intend, or in no way did I mean that we take Spalding County and try to make a business out of it, because that's not going to happen. It's just too many things, too many variables in Spalding County. Specifically, the SPLOST, we should identify the projects, we should identify the cost of each project, and the new laws that have happened since the last SPLOST, and William, correct me if I'm wrong, we have to identify every road that we plan on improving. We have to identify the amount that we're looking at spending on that amount of road, whether it be paving or resurfacing. We have to identify costs on any bridge that we're looking at by name, project name, correct?
You don't have to go into that greater detail, but you can.
But it's pretty much,
It's-
it's pretty much there. The days of, we're gonna buy a radio system for this amount and then turn it around to, that amount, those are over,
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
And so if we're gonna advertise a SPLOST, I think we should do so with prudence and justification. If not, I think we should wait until we can.
Madam Chairman, correct me, William, but that is what we've done in the past. We've gotten what we felt were the best estimates for what the costs were at the time that we asked. Isn't that what happened with 800 megahertz?
We have never analyzed operational cost as it relates to SPLOST after the capital improvements are completed.
Okay.
We have estimated the cost of the project, the design, the engineering, et cetera, but we've never gone to that second point of what is it going to cost to operate and maintain once it's built.
Okay, then my next question would be then, if that is, and I agree that that's certainly, with the situation that we have here, that certainly should be a phase that we look at. But in terms of all of these projects, who's paying for the design and engineering for the senior center? Who paid for the design and engineering? Did that come out of SPLOST money?
Yes, ma'am. That's all part of the grand total for the project.
Okay, so if the idea is to have that stuff done on the front end, who's gonna pay for that?
Well, there's A, not enough time, and B, no money to go out and hire engineers and architects and things like that to do these things. But you can get cost estimates from folks, and Animal Control had a cost estimate, the ACAB had a cost estimate for a shelter, but it was a lot more than the $1 million that we put in there. To have physical drawings, surveys, the whole 9 yards, there's no money out there in any budget to do that. But I don't think that is the detail that that Commissioner Hallbaker and Commissioner Ray expected, but I don't know.
Right, so the point I'm making is that historically, what has happened is, once these projects were approved, funds came out of that money that was allocated for that project to do the design and the engineering.
Correct.
So I think the expectation that we're gonna have all that detail on the front end is not real. So, and maybe, my idea was that, my thought process was that there was going to be a new shelter. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, if you basically go to work on the old one, where are you gonna put the animals you got in there? I mean, that's part of the problem we had before, was that the building was old, we had to shut it down before because of the painting, no air conditioning, but all I'm saying is, I think in order to be realistic, it would be great to run this like a business model, but in terms of trying to figure out who's gonna pay for design, and if we're just asking for a cost estimate, my assumption was that this was what was done, that there were cost estimates made. Now, in terms of the Animal Control Center, I think this board agreed that all we really wanted to spend for a new facility was $1 million. So what the ACAB suggested to us was about a $2.8 million building.
I thought it was 1.8.
1.8.
That's correct.
So, I mean, even with that that process, we know we're only gonna spend $1,000. So, and the assumption would be that, who would have to pay for that? If there's gonna be design and engineering, we'd have to pay for it on the front end.
Yeah, that all comes out of the $1 million.
Okay, so-
That was the whole idea, and I think there was something mentioned about the 1.8 million on Facebook pages and other meetings and things like that they were gonna acquire grants and get things to do that, but this board only approved $1 million, period. So I think there were two messages getting out. $1 million from y'all, but at one point, hey, we're really gonna build this 1.8 because we're gonna get grants and blah, blah, blah.
Right, but in terms of who the property belongs to and who's responsible for it, that's us, and that's what we said we were gonna spend $1 million. All I'm saying is that I understand what you guys wanted, but the cost to get that specifically, you know, I'm not real sure about that. I think in terms of extrapolating what it's gonna cost annually, I mean, we have records that tells us how much it costs to operate in terms of utilities and staff annually already, don't we?
For the shelter.
Right, for the shelter. We don't have any estimations on how much the utility bills are gonna go up at Wyandotte Park based on, because they're not using lights there now, are they, TJ? They're using the other lights at night?
There's one field that's lit now.
Okay, so,
It would be new lights, new usage.
right, so
So
that.
we could base it off the use of that
Of the
one
one.
field.
Okay,
Yes.
so, and we don't have that yet, right?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so how many fields would that include with this cost? 5 more fields?
It was gonna be 4.
Okay, so sort of we could get an idea about what it's gonna cost for that. The question is, are we gonna look at how much we gotta pay to cut the grass? Because I don't know that we're cutting the grass that regularly if they're gonna be doing something on it. Are we gonna have to line those fields? Is that gonna cost more? Just asking.
There'll be additional usage because they'll make the fields available at times that they're not right now.
Okay, so will you be able to extrapolate how much more that may cost us? I mean, I know it's gonna be an estimation, but I think that, in terms of, many of these things, we're gonna have to go with estimates. I mean, I think the kind of detail that we'd like to have is not gonna be possible because we're the ones who have to come up with the cost, you know, and the projections, and I agree with you that, you know, I don't know that there'll be extra money collected, but I think in being specific about what the project is, that you don't necessarily have to say we're gonna build a 10,000 square foot animal shelter. We're gonna build an animal shelter with $1 million.
I think Commissioner Ray had something, I think Commissioner Hallberger did too. So-
Well, I was just going to say this, that, you know, I wasn't on this board last year, but I advocated for passage of SPLOST, and frankly, it was very difficult for those of us in that position to try and explain the aquatic center, for instance, because we didn't have really the kind of detail to work with that would overcome voter concerns about the operational and maintenance costs that facility would add on to the county's general revenue bill. And, you know, I'm not even sure what the real project that the animal control folks had in mind was. And frankly, if we're just going to allocate $1 million and towards a project that really needs to be 1.8 million, then I say we either do it all the way or we don't do it at all. We allocate that $1 million somewhere else. In terms of the kind of detail that I would like to see for any proposed projects, I think we've already had an example here. I'm not necessarily speaking in favor or against it, but the two gentlemen who talked about a pickleball facility provided a PowerPoint with projected drawings. They went out and got cost estimates for everything from clearing additional space for parking that would hopefully be attracted by tournaments, down to the roof structure and the projected ongoing maintenance and operation expenses, which would be negligible. And that's the kind of thing I would like to see proponents of these projects, provide to this board so that we know we're making as informed of a decision as we possibly can, and we know what it is that we are asking the voters to approve. Roads and bridges, yeah, we've got to, that's just a necessary, in my opinion, ongoing cost of doing business and serving our citizens. Same thing with the CAD, that's protecting our citizens who need 911 services. These other things are, and paying off debt, that is what it is, and it's projected to loosen up debt service of mid six figures per year. So I mean, I think that's just prudent business operations and business judgment to do those kind of things, and I believe that the voters can all get behind that. When it comes to the soccer lights and the aquatic center and the animal control center, I think we really do. I'm not troubled by the idea of soccer lights so these kids can quit all practicing on one field or a portion of a field in the evening. They can't even practice on a regular field or at least half a field, so that they can be prepared for their games on the weekends. I'm not troubled by that sort of a thing, and it basically is what it is. To put up 4 sets of lights and pay for the ongoing maintenance and operations. But when it comes to things like this, the aquatic center and the animal control facility, and really anything else that somebody's going to ask us to seriously consider adding to the SPLOST project, in addition to meeting criteria that it's good for the county, it improves our the standard of living, or it's going to attract or retain folks. Criteria such as low or no ongoing maintenance and operation costs. It should also be detailed for us with best good faith estimates of costs, and to the extent any drawings or visualizations of those projects can be prepared. I think those kind of things that's a very reasonable request for us as board members to ask and expect.
Commissioner Ray?
Again, I apologize, I didn't make myself very clear. We're not asking for specifics. We're not asking for final diagrams that we're going to give to the city of Griffin and say, we want to build this inside the city of Griffin, i.e. the aquatic center or Spalding County on the animal shelter. What we want are the preliminary designs, like what we did with UGA Griffin, UGA Griffin, when they built the learning center. We want to do the same thing that the Board of Education did with their college and career academy. We want to provide those drawings, rendition of what the building is going to look like. That way the voter can set an image in their mind, number one. With that rendition and those preliminary drawings, we have a preliminary cost. Granted, costs will go up, costs will go down. We have a major hurricane, material costs will go up. Katrina took care of that in 08, when she made a visit to the Gulf. And those things we have no control over. All we can do is control the cost of the project before, during, and after. And we haven't done that very well as a government. And I'm saying, let's take a new step. Let's ask for preliminary designs. Let's ask for cost. Let's ask for cost of operations and maintenance. That is not imprudent. That is not unreasonable. That is justifiable. If we expect the voters of this community to come out and say yes to needs that we have within our community.
Just very briefly, for instance, just these cost estimates that were attached to the email. They were attachments to the email that William printed out for us and handed out. I mean, even something like this, is better than just a single number, bottom line number for city park projects, $130,000. Well, at least it's broken out between the AC option, the swamp cooler option, and Bucks project. This is the kind of detail that, at a minimum, we ought to have before us before any type of project makes the final cut.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna be about to wrap what I was gonna say on this.
You'll come back to it.
But I've talked to a lot of people since we had that last meeting. And everybody I've talked to does not want anything here that's gonna cost the taxpayers any money. Doesn't make any difference what it is. We've got to give the taxpayers a break. That's the only reason I agreed to just pay off the debt, so that the property taxpayers of Spalding County could get a tax break. If we don't do that, I can tell you what, right now, we're gonna be fighting ourselves against the wall. I've tried to sit and explain to people I've talked to, and I've probably talked to more people than y'all looked at in the last month.
I doubt that.
I don't know, I tell you what, that telephone is backlog. But, they do not want anything that's gonna cost them any money, tax dollars on the end. Doesn't make any difference what it is. They don't care what it's gonna cost. The project's way I understood, William, to say, if you designate $3.8 million for a swimming pool, that's what you gotta spend. You can't go over that.
Design, engineering.
Right, every
You
what
can
it is.
spend less.
Huh?
You can spend less.
Or you can spend less, but you ain't, that's never gonna happen, I can tell you that right now. You talking about government, they don't do that.
School system's done it with every response they've had.
I think the whole idea is going back to having the information in front of us. I think it's doing the due diligence of doing our homework. We gotta at least do our homework. Okay, come on. That's what we're here. We gotta do our homework. We gotta let the people know that we're doing our homework, and then we make the decision. I'm kind of like that. I don't want to throw a figure out there either. And I hate to keep going back to the senior center, whatever. I know that money's end up coming about, but I'm sorry. If you allot $1 million for something and end up coming with $3 million, it just doesn't make good business sense. I don't care how it pans out. And I don't think we need to take that route. So I think we need to do our homework.
What did you just say? I didn't get that. You said if we spend $1 million.
No, I said going back to the senior center. I said I don't want that situation to happen, even though the monies did end up coming from somewhere. The whole idea was there was $1 million allotted for that, and we ended up spending $3 million, right?
Okay, let me give you a little history. There was, how much was it, William? 750, 500,000?
There was 600,000 in the SPLOST, and we were going to apply for a CDBG grant as well, bringing the total up to about $1 million.
Did we apply for the CDBG?
We did not.
Okay,
Okay.
so $600,000. First, the senior center was gonna be at the Elks Club, or whatever. Wait a minute.
Okay.
Then we did a study about the potential for putting it down where the old senior center was. So between that study, this study, the study for the Coke building, and then finally putting it down there, that was 4 studies that netted how much money, Mr. Brooks? I know you know. Okay, anyway, a good chunk of the money that was supposed to go for building the projects have been expended in studies. Now, I'm not saying that's anybody's fault, but it was just because they couldn't come up with a location. So what you basically would had left over after that was maybe $300,000, and that was before the design was done. So, what is the expectation for the seniors who came here and wanted a nice senior center that we were going to be able to build? So that money that we over-collected was really a godsend, because we were able to make a first-class facility
It's a nice facility.
that was awesome. So, I mean, the decision we made was that, and that's how that decision got made. I just want to understand what you guys are saying. You're saying that in terms of the animal shelter, you want to see how much bricks and mortar is going to cost, how much it's going to cost for the HVAC system, how many square feet it's going to be?
At least how many square feet, the estimated cost, preliminary cost of construction, because we presented the animal shelter from Glenn County, and that was, I could have used that extraction earlier, but the facility, we knew going in it was more than what we had allotted, $1 million. And if we're gonna plan for $1 million, let's show a facility and give a preliminary design to the taxpayer that says, this is $1 million, not 1.8. And that was, I didn't agree with that, but we as a board voted, and so we did that. Bottom line comes down to is, if we've got to be able to account to the taxpayer, we're gonna buy this notebook for $1 million. Unlike, what we've done in the past. This is a $1 million notebook. This is a $1.8 million notebook. This is the one we're buying, not this one. When we, the money that God sent us was a collection of over 7 years, because the decision just kept going on and on and on the senior citizen. And so thank goodness that was allowed, because originally the plan was to build on what we had. Then after that, we were going out to Carver Road, and we couldn't go out there because of the rocks.
Study.
Yeah. And I just want us to be prudent, reasonable, and logical about what we're doing, and have the basic numbers we can work with. We can't do $1 million facility funding when we're showing the taxpayer this right here. We can't do that.
Oh, one other thing. You all are saying that we're tasking William and staff to come up with these numbers, because there's nobody else to come up with them.
Well, I think the proponents of these projects,
They're the citizens. It's the citizens. You want the soccer people to come up with a plan. You want the Animal Care and Advisory Committee is a volunteer group, just like any other board, Park and Rec. You wouldn't expect Park and Rec Park and Rec board to come up with this information.
but the staff is available to confer with.
So-
They pretty much staff already pretty much already did this list that was discussed at the last Parks and Rec advisory meeting. That's what I understand was submitted post-meeting.
So what I'm saying is, you want staff to get us this information, because nobody on the board would have the ability, advisory board would have the ability and the knowledge to give us the detail. And I don't even know that Brent would have that information, would have the capability of getting us that information. So who would that be?
Let me ask a question about that. Now, a year ago, TJ, we went somewhere to look at an aquatic center. Several of us here did.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you came back with numbers and records and everything, and a little bit of it. We didn't go too deep in it, but you had some information for us that kind of go by, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And what we did was we basically cut and pasted pieces of projects that were existing and said, this is kind of what we can do.
Okay.
This is kind of what
That's
it
kind of a
looks like.
semi thing. As far as, information.
That's as close as
That's
we're
close
going
we're gonna be able to
Yeah.
get for anything.
That's as close as we
without
got.
spending money.
But that was one of the more detailed.
That was-
explanations.
it was,
It wasn't the
yes.
911 center that we had last year.
It was.
He made a very good presentation, gave the numbers. The only thing left
saw
off of
the
those
facility.
were future costs. And
But we
we took a stab at that.
But we really didn't, I don't think that was part of it was discussed. We were looking at the design, we were looking at maybe we could do something in this arena, but I don't think we actually pinpointed.
Right, some
approximates,
information
just
that we're
something,
gonna,
it wasn't there because we didn't go that far.
right, irregardless of what project we're building, if it's an animal center, if it's a swim center, or it's a park, we're gonna need to know exactly what y'all want, what size you want it,
Right.
what amenities y'all are gonna want, and then we can go from there. We can get very close. I wouldn't say we're super close last time, but we can get very close, but we're gonna need some details from the board, to get those.
And those
out
things
for you.
detailed, TJ's being nice. We're going to need, if we do an aquatic center, we need to know where. Because you got to do parking, you got to make sure water and sewer is there. There's lots of things that we need to base those costs on that we never decided where the aquatic center was going to go. It was talked about at the senior center. It was talked about at Carver Road. It was talked about at Wilmington Tice Park. So today, before you leave, what I would like to get from this board is, what projects do you want us to get costs on? And approximately where, you know, you want these located. Do we want to put a new animal shelter directly behind the existing animal shelter where there's water and sewer already? Or do we want to go over to Carver Road and completely,
No,
I mean, y'all tell, I don't know.
Yeah.
It wasn't,
he never.
But let me ask you a question, I know where you're getting, and I understand that thought process, of course, but kind of working backwards here, does it make sense to have the information in front of us first before we decide on location? Or do we have to have a location, because that could be a deciding factor as far as the money.
It's like a lot of people, we already own the property, we gotta go back on.
Well, that's the
And
whole
also
thing, we should
parking.
buy it.
parking,
Parking, but
lighting.
also, you talk about a lot of money just for parking.
Right.
But also, we need to know what it's gonna cost to operate. How many people you're gonna have to hire to operate these things? Because that's gotta fall back on the taxpayer. And the taxpayers are not gonna stand for it, I can tell you that right now.
We won't know what you're
And
gonna
we
do.
go, and I guarantee you, when we do it, I'm gonna sit down and tell them exactly, because I'm not gonna sit up here and lie to them, that way, we gonna have a $3 million swim center, and it ain't gonna cost you nothing to operate. You know, I wanna, and I still wanna know what the senior building.
That's part
Every
of what-
time, I want the cost of what the personnel in it costs, lights, what it costs to operate, because people wanna know what it
I think
costs.
that's part of what we're trying to get to.
Huh? Well,
I know you get excited.
That's part of the information we're trying to get.
I agree with you guys, I think we should get that. We should get the best information that we could get. I think in the case of the animal shelter, ACAB looked at the Marriott Renaissance, and we wanted to buy Fairfield Inn with our money. And I- No, not Hotel 6, Fairfield Inn. We still want it to be nice, we want it to be an inviting place, but we don't want to spend Renaissance money. And I think that's the same thing TJ did, because there were some much nicer indoor swimming facilities, and the one that we saw was even kind of a Cadillac for this area, but we kind of looked at what we were doing, scaled down. All that, I understand what you guys are talking about, and that is fine. I'm just trying to understand, if we're paying off $3 million in debt, how much money is that going to actually net us in income?
We did.
I had those calculations,
The millage rate was 0.9.
hang on just a second.
It was right at 600,000
Okay,
cash flow.
the annual debt service is for all these projects, is about $1 million.
And what's the longest these projects are going to run out? I
Okay,
know that the fire station is,
the fire station was 10 years.
mhm,
The Correctional Institute was 20 years.
and what exactly would be
It
out?
started in 99 and it goes to 19, so, 2019.
So what's the debt left on the correction center? Can you tell me that?
Yes, ma'am. $1,055,000.
Okay.
The Oxford Square, we did it for 20 years as well. It comes off in 2020, and the debt owed on it is $690,000. Senior Center furniture and things like that's $57,000. We only did it for 5 years.
Okay, so where is that on here?
It's in the. I
That's
don't
the
know what
new
you're
project
looking
list.
we ain't got
That was the
that.
project list of
I don't
2014.
know.
That's last year's
You're
project
looking.
list.
Okay, no.
No, it's not.
Remember, y'all didn't do,
I'm
you were
sorry.
gonna do pay-as-you-go debt service last year, not issue bonds and pay it off. So there was no savings per year because it was gonna be one of the last projects. You know, in order to have savings in the general fund and the fire district fund, you have to issue sales tax bonds to go ahead and pay this off, so that in fiscal year 2017, the debt service, the annual debt service of $500,000 goes away.
And you said, you estimate the bond cost was gonna be at how many $100,000?
The only way let me find your other email. The only estimate I could use was based on the city's debt service, and they were going to do, and all I did was use proportions. They were going to issue $12.5 million in bonds with $701,000 in interest, and they were going to finance it for 6 years. If I took that and matriculated it down to hours, our estimated interest would be $152,000 plus issuance cost on the $2.7 million that we were going to borrow.
Okay. I must have the wrong paper because mine says 3.4.
What are,
That's what this
That
is
was
all.
then, this is now.
Okay, do I got a new paper?
No, it's not.
I sent you an email,
Oh, yes.
April 17th.
Yeah,
and
okay.
that, my answers in red were based on how much we owe now because the debt, we paid our debt service.
Okay, so
This
I don't even know how
fiscal
this paper was here. But anyway, so, and you were saying maybe approximately 150,000, and then you said the issuance of the bonds. You
Right.
couldn't what's your best ballpark figure on that?
A couple $100,000.
So the
So-
interest to pay off the bonds is 150,000, and to get the bonds issued is a couple of $100,000.
Yes, ma'am, at the most.
And where is that money gonna come from?
That comes out of the SPLOST as well.
Out of the 2.4 or whatever it is we're asking for?
Well, we'd be asking for 2.7 plus cost of issuance, and then the interest would be paid out of the SPLOST proceeds along with the debt service as it comes due, just like we've done all the bonds. None of that comes out of general fund, it all comes out of SPLOST funds. So yes, the 2.7 is gonna be pretty much closer to 3.1 than, because the 2.7 is just the amount we owe,
Mhm.
And if we had the bonds to it, it'll be closer to 3.1.
3.1.
Okay, all right, let me ask you this, William. If we don't do the bonds, the sales tax comes off effective January, I mean, it's a splash pass to come off, start January the 1st, right?
No.
No, it would actually be April the 1st because there's not enough time to get it started in January. It's the next calendar quarter following
So it'd be
90
$700,000.
days,
All right, and you're looking roughly, what, $600,000 a month,
roughly.
roughly?
And that's, remember that we don't get all that. We have to
Dispense.
Spread it out.
dispense to the cities, then to us.
Well, I like the idea of what roughly we would get. I can see what William's going, and I have a problem with all this money you talk about, roughly $500,000 that you go spend on bonds.
But-
Time you do the bonds and you pay somebody to do them, you're talking, well, maybe not 400, say 400,000.
Okay.
But I'm just using rough numbers. I'd rather take that money, what I want to be able to tell the taxpayers, okay, we're gonna start a splash if this thing passes, and we're gonna get this much money per month. By the first year, we should be able to pay that debt off with our part. 300,000 times.
Then we would have to establish the bond as a priority debt, what the first item to be completed by the splash.
Right, then you would,
Without bonds, you would have to identify the priority of which the payoff of the splash projects would be done. If not, then that each project would carry to the end of the splash, which would mean there would be no substantial savings to the taxpayer. We couldn't give it to them.
because without the board determining a priority like that, we take the amount for each project and divide it over 6 years, and that's how much that project gets
So
per
you
year.
can't do it all. say,
You
well,
can, but the
We
board
want to
would,
identify that for the first year.
We have to
Pay that
identify
debt
the-
off the first year.
Yeah.
And then you can go with the tax decrease.
Yeah.
technically, but what about the $1 million that I need for CAD and telephone system at 911? I need that right now.
But debt service is not a countywide project. So I'm thinking, I mean, it helps us, But in terms of the entire county, it's not like the 911 system. Because everybody in the county that is a resident or even a voter doesn't necessarily own property.
Yeah, they do, their taxes go down.
No, everybody that lives here doesn't own property. So you're making this decision about putting the debt repayment ahead of everything else to serve.
No decision's been made, we're just making a request.
No, I'm just saying
We're making a
euphemistically.
request.
I'm just saying that.
In order for this to
that-
happen like this, what she's saying is, it'll only benefit, quote unquote, the property owner.
Only the property owner.
See, I disagree with that because property owners take their taxes and add that into their rent. If they don't, that's foolish on their part. But most property owners will take the taxes and add that into the rent cost for anything that you're paying in rent.
Right.
So-
But I can guarantee you that no property owner who is renting is going to reduce their lessee's rent because their property taxes went down.
Well, that's their property, they can do what they want.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying, but so these people are not gonna benefit from this. Now, understand, I hear what William's saying, I see where we're going with, in terms of how the money's gonna help us. He said approximately $500,000 or $600,000. But that, I don't think that debt repayment is considered a level 1 project. Level 1 projects are projects that can be considered countywide, and that should actually come off the top. And the last time, we had 3 projects that were off the top. We had the CAD, we had the animal shelter, and we had the indoor swim facility, because they were considered countywide projects. So, and I'm not saying they still can't be countywide projects, because they do affect really, those projects actually affect the entirety of the county. Now, maybe somebody may not want to use the dog shelter or whatever, but it's for the benefit of the entire county. But in order to get to where Bart's talking about, in order for us to be able to see the money that William is talking about saving fairly quickly, then the only way that we're going to be able to do that is to bond. There's no, because even if we waited a year, you're still going to be paying this debt service, and it's not going to make it any less. So you're going to have to actually eat up $400,000 to be able to see an initial return of that $500,000.
It's a lot like buying a car.
So that money, and we can ask for that money to come out of the SPLOST itself, but that'll be part of the loan. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I usually don't have a problem with bonding and borrowing. I usually do have a problem with that. But I can see in this instance, if what we're gonna do with this $600,000, that is a portion of this is gonna go directly to an observable and objectable reduction in a millage rate. I'm not saying that all of it should go to a millage rate reduction, but I think that in terms of what Bart is saying, it can be some help to the taxpayer. I don't want you to think that that is something, I don't think that's something for everybody. Everybody's not a property tax owner. The other thing is, you guys are like stuck on stay on this transportation money. Nobody said anything about another tower for the 800 megahertz system. We need a tower desperately. Where is that money gonna come from? We've talked about wanting to get from under some of the debt that we were in. When we did the 800 megahertz agreement, we agreed that that would be our project coming up, is to fund putting another tower out in eastern Spalding County. Why aren't we looking at having some money to come out of this for a tower? That will certainly reduce some of the major costs, at least free up, how much, William, a year?
We were talking before you got here about the towers and things, and I think it's about $8,000 a month, so. And it was gonna take us about 2.5 years to pay for the cost to take it off of one tower and install it on another tower.
Right. But, so the answer is, do we just keep paying $100,000 a year? Or do we move it and the tower belongs to us?
And we making sales spots on that tower.
It doesn't matter. I mean, we can't sell on somebody else's tower.
Right. But if we put up our own tower, we could. I don't have a problem with putting a tower on that. Anything that's gonna cut the expenses down, because within 3 years, we're gonna have a lot more bills than we got.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've got to try to figure out how to cut these things down without going through the taxpayers to pay for them.
Well, one of the, Madam Chairman, if I may continue, one of the other things that I heard Commissioner Hallbaker say was that roads and bridges are just part of what the taxpayer, we're supposed to do for the taxpayer. But my understanding from OCGA is that one of the reasons we collect property taxes is for roads. And one of the reasons we collect property taxes is to run the jail. One of the reasons we collect property taxes is to run the courthouse and to keep officers at the courthouse. And I'm sure there's something else. But, so, SPLOST money is not necessarily a thing. I mean, either we can't afford to take care of our roads, or we can't, because roads are always going to need to be fixed. The potholes are always going to need to be fixed. That is it should be an ongoing expense for us. So some of this money that we have the potential for freeing up can better be used for those things that we're supposed to be doing with property tax money. Because right now we're running planning and development with property tax money. We're giving money to, I think we have to give money to Family and Children's Services. Is that right, William?
Yes,
Are we required to keep the health department open?
yes, ma'am.
We're giving money to, but we're supporting the 4-H people. We're doing the voters registration office. I mean, we're doing tons of stuff that we're not required to with the taxpayers' money. So, you know, I think personally, we need to really look at this transportation money and look at places where we may reduce our debt in terms of like looking at trying to make sure we get a tower and make that ours so that we can generate income from it. Because, I mean, the whole purpose of us when we got our 800 megahertz talk was that, well, once we get these towers, if anybody wants to rent space on them, we can generate income from it. And of course, things didn't work out that way. So this is where we are. So I certainly would love for us to, that should be, if that could be, William, one of the things that you could give us some detailed information on. I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but I think that should be something that will benefit the entire county.
Go ahead.
I respectfully disagree and on the roads and bridges and things of that nature. When you look at Bart's area, my area, Don's area, we're historic. I mean, we have more rural roads than two of you. And not saying that that's a bad thing, it's a good thing. But we can't afford not to continue on our roads. And we get phone calls every day about potholes and things of that nature. We have been working on our roads, trying to get caught up, because we've only been allowed the last few years economically to do certain things. And roads was already kind of put down toward the bottom of it. We'll patch them, we'll do this, we'll keep them up, and we'll work with the LMIG and the funds we get from the state. Well, the state keeps decreasing that amount. And we've got making us come up with the remainder. House Bill 170 is a prime example of that, because they haven't figured out the impacts of it yet. And that was as of Monday last week when we finished with ACCG. They're still tossing coins up in the air trying to figure out the exact meaning of the bill, the unintended consequences of the bill, and the, oh man, that's really going to happen type thing. So roads, yes, I agree. We have to pay attention to, we have to maintain, because if we don't maintain those, our citizens are not going to be happy. Bridges act the same thing. Hale Street is a prime example. It is a thoroughfare from one of the north side, from that side of the community back into town. And not just Sun City, but the area around Atkinson, Ann Street, Atkinson School, and things of that nature, they rely on that. School buses have to go around. And I'm just trying to say, basically, we've got a lot of priorities. We've got a lot of glass balls we're tossing up in there and trying to keep balance. We've done fairly good in doing that, but we're trying to, all we're asking for is just to be a little more, the taxpayers are asking for a clearer picture if they're gonna vote for SPLOST. And with that, we've got to give them a clearer picture of the glass globes we've got balanced in the air.
But Commissioner Ray, Madam Chairman, if I may, Commissioner Ray and William, what monies did we collect for transportation in the last SPLOST that passed? I guess it was the 08 SPLOST.
$10 million, don't hold me to that. That number comes off the top of my head.
Okay, so.
Most of that was used for resurfacing.
Okay. Any of that used for bridges? Because
Yes,
didn't we-
ma'am, we're using it for our match on the West McIntosh Road Bridge. We used it for our match on the,
16. Was it 92 or 16?
neither one of those.
West
Those are
McIntosh.
state routes. But Smoke Road Bridge, we used it to acquire the right-of-way there and do the things that we had to do. And we have a small amount in there for the Jordan Hill Road Bridge for right-of-way acquisition and stuff like that. But, you know, less than $50,000. But there were 3 bridges that were in that.